All right, how are we doing today? Wonderful. Man, pictures are powerful. I don't know if you've thought about this like I have, but they're so powerful that I bet we could do an activity and have a little competition in here just using pictures. You guys want to try? Fantastic. 4 of you. That's awesome. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to put on the screen a set of emojis. Now, these emojis are going to tell somewhat of a story, and you've got to guess what movie title or what movie these emojis are telling you, all right? If you get it right, you get a point. But here's what you have to do. Don't yell it out, or you'll give away the answer. You must stand to your feet. By look, I will see who stood up first, and I will call upon you to see if you are correct. The one with the most points at the end of the games will win a $25 gift card to the wonderful Starbucks. Are we ready? Okay, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, what movie is this? Yes, sir. You are correct, sir. He's got himself a point. Well done. All right, next. What movie is this? Yes, ma'am. Little Mermaid. She is correct. Well done. All right, you have a point. All right, next up, here we go. What movie is this? Home Alone. Well done. Yes. It's one of the best Christmas movies of all time. You know, you can get it even in not Christmas season. All right, next, last one here. We'll see if we have a 4-way tie. In that case, we might have a rock, paper, scissors tournament later on. We'll have to see. All right, next, what is this movie? Yes, sir. Titanic, you are correct, and you are our winner. Well done. Remind me afterwards, I'll get you that gift card, all right? All right, so pictures really are powerful. I know that it's more than just a game, but I don't know if you've dove into this maybe like I have, but it's incredible the research behind how powerful images in pictures really are. In fact, as I kind of dove deeper into this, there was so many fun facts that I just was blown away. In fact, a few of them were about the emotional impact that pictures and images have on our lives and the fact they can completely change our emotions. Right? When we saw that picture of the Twin Towers falling, it just completely changes our whole attitude. It's wild. In fact, pictures can even create a subliminal influence inside our minds, which is why we see probably around 2,000 plus images a day of advertisements coming after us, trying to subliminally influence us into purchasing their products. And if you even go even deeper into it, images are literally shown and proven to change and impact behavior. It is wild how pictures, how powerful they really are. But you know this already, right? In fact, if I say the word tiger, I highly doubt that those in this room started thinking of the letters T-I-G-E-R. You probably thought of the big bengaled animal, right? And we've seen it even when we're, just casually sitting back because pictures, they're so powerful and they do so much that it's been proven that pictures will increase communication, increase speed and memory. In fact, the Oregon Ducks football team back in the early 2000s figured this out, and they created something called the hurry up offense using pictures on the sidelines. Now they just talk to them in their headsets because they can, who loves technology these days? But back in the day, this caught on like craziness in the college football. All the teams had those big giant signs that nobody in the stands knew what they mean. They're like, why do they have a picture of Madonna? I don't know, right? And it was crazy, but it just introduced this new way of communicating to these 19 and 20-year-olds in a new way that they could run plays so much faster. And if we really slow down to think about it, even in our boardrooms or in our meetings, we realize the power of a picture and image. Somebody can stand up and just list data, and here's the data, and here's the science, and here's the, stats. But it's when somebody finally shares the story that ties back to the data that we actually start to listen. Have you noticed this? It's that story that somebody said. It's about that provider who maybe had that bad experience that he probably didn't justify maybe spending that extra expense to help out with, whatever it was, the travel. But man, after you heard that story, you're like, all right, we're going to do it. Because stories move us. And a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? In other words, a story plays in our heads when we see a picture. It's wild to think. And we have so many pictures that happen around us, and these pictures is what connects our heads and our hearts to make different decisions. But the problem is, not all of the pictures and images and stories that we see and hear are for our benefit. In fact, many of us, when we wake up, the first thing we do is we grab our phones and we begin scrolling at all of the images. We see it, and it starts feeding our minds with things. We drive down the interstate, and we see the picturesque billboards. We turn on our televisions. We'll go to the movies. We see the previews. We're in the aisle at the grocery store, and we see the magazines of the picturesque, beautiful, airbrushed, models. And we just can't help but think in the back of our mind, no matter how much we know it is fake, we can't help but believe that they just have it better than we do. The perfect car, the picture of the kids always smiling, right, that our friends post, when we know that's not reality. But it doesn't matter if we know, because even though we consciously know that that's not real, it impacts us. And it starts putting a pressure on us that we may not realize. A pressure of perfection, to live the picture-perfect life. To have the picture-perfect job, with the picture-perfect spouse, with the picture-perfect family, and that everything should be just smooth and easy and nothing should be hard, because everybody knows life is #blessed, right? When the reality is, I bet many of us in this room have faced some sort of a devastating loss of a family member, maybe a demotion, maybe divorce, maybe even depression. But we're not seeing that in the images, because who wants to put that out in the world? But the problem is, this picture-perfect life that we see all around us is causing more harm than we think. And I share this with you because I don't know if you've noticed it. There's a couple of examples that I'm going to give you, and it's just wild. When I share this, I hope it surprises you like it surprises me. So how many of you here have heard of the app Strava? Has anybody heard of this app? Okay, yeah, you're probably all runners. Good for you guys. Strava is a running app, right? And how it works is ultimately you run, and it tracks where you run, what your time was, and you compete with this community, and everybody can see it. Well, there is some young 20-somethings that have learned how to make a side hustle of income, because there is now a new popular side hustle called the Strava Jockey. And ultimately what this is these young 20-somethings who love to run are having executives of large companies pay them to log in as them so that they can appear as if they are running great times while also leading their businesses, because they are the picture-perfect leader who has everything together. This is a true story. This is really happening. We have this pressure that we don't even recognize, and some of us do this in our own way. It may not be that much, but we're posting things, we're saying things that we know probably aren't the real story, right? We're all guilty of this. But we have this, for some reason, this weird pressure on ourselves that we have to appear perfect to everyone else, that we have it all together. In addition to that, there's another type of pressure that this picture-perfect world has created on us, and it's this pressure that we actually put on ourselves to not only appear perfect, but to be perfect. So much so that we will self-sabotage ourselves just to make sure that we can justify not getting to perfection. Let me give you an example of this. There is a phenomenal tennis player named Mikhail Yuzny. And on live television, in an actual tennis match, Mikhail did something that completely blew everyone's mind. He is a perfectionist. He expects perfection from himself. And he's going to be at the bottom of the screen. And I just want you to watch and just imagine the pressure of perfection that this man is under. Check it out.
Yes.
I'm going to pause. I apologize if it was too graphic, but is that not wild? But if you've ever played golf with me, it's pretty similar. But we all do this probably in some sort of way, but what's the problem here? What's the problem here? The problem is we have this idea of perfection, and we think that the perfect life exists. Mikhail thinks he should be able to return every easy shot easily. But yet we are human and make mistakes, and either A, we hide those mistakes because we don't want others to know we're not perfect, or B, we absolutely destroy ourselves, maybe not physically, but internally in our heads in the way that we talk to each other after we fail. Am I right? This is happening everywhere, and I share this with you because it's happened to me. I've had a huge struggle with this. In fact, the first year my son was born, I put so much pressure on myself to be the perfect dad, to be the perfect professional, and be the perfect husband. I had so many great influencers around me, great people to look up to, that I just thought I had to live up to the standard that was set before me. And so even though I was on the road traveling, I was gone 150 days of the first year of my son's existence, I still wanted to be perfect. So I would FaceTime and sing him to bed every single night. And although that sounds really sweet, I wasn't actually backing up any of the values I stood for or cared for, because if I really valued my son, I wouldn't be on the road traveling 150 days of the year. And so I came into this huge crossroads where my values and my actions were not in alignment, and I ended up spiraling into depression. And it was a horrible time of my life. And it all started because I had this expectation of my head of what perfection really should look like, and I should be that. And anything less, there's no excuse. And I don't know if you realize this, but perfectionism is literally a silent killer across the United States. It has so many side effects, from procrastination to anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, decreased productivity, you name it, it is probably there. This is only some of the things that I pulled out, but it's just wild to me how rampant this is running and how much it's causing damage, but yet we're not paying attention to it. So today, we want to basically move from this idea. What I hope to do with you today is to move from this idea of picture perfect to a new idea of picturing progress. And I actually want to use pictures to do it. I'm going to try and give you a couple of images that I have had in my life that have completely helped me. They've been transformative in my life to help me get out of this mindset of I've got to be perfect and push me into the progress mindset. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, I need this talk just as much as you do, okay? Because I have to remind myself of this over and over and over again, because progress is much more of a journey than it is a destination. It's like breathing. You can never take a deep enough breath to be good with life, right? It's like you'll eventually choke. You'll eventually suffocate. Progress is the same way. It is a lifestyle. It's constantly reminding ourselves that it's okay. Like, I'm going to keep moving. I can learn from this. But for some reason in our minds, it's planted. No, like, I should achieve it, and I should just feel it, and it should all be good, and I should arrive. But that is not the case. So with that, I'd love to introduce myself. Is that okay? All right, so here's a little bit about me. My name is J.T. Thoms. As Ann said, I do have the wonderful, delightful pleasure to work at Jackson & Coker. I have some of my wonderful, esteemed colleagues with me here today, Tim, Ann, and Lakeisha, and Tanika. And I love where I work. I love what I do. And I also love to be on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is an awesome tool. I get to connect with incredible people. I think because of LinkedIn, I got to connect with some of you in this room. Me and Mylan got to have a conversation recently just because of LinkedIn. We stay connected, and it's just such a good tool. And this is my family over here on the left. You can see my wife and my 3 kids. And isn't that a perfect little picture, right? That is not what life really looks like. So I thought I'd give you a sneak peek of what things actually look like in our home. This is more of the reality here. So it's a little embarrassing and crazy, but you know, this is real life, right? It's not always where they're smiling and it's beautiful and everyone's dressed to the nines. That is just one day a year in October when we go to the fields and my wife has hired the photographer, right? That is a small snippet. Real life is me trying to figure out how am I going to get my daughter to pay attention and use the bathroom, and also while my son is not wanting to finish his homework, and my other daughter is coloring on the wall, right? That's real life for us, and probably real life for you. But I am grateful because now that I work at Jackson & Coker, I get to be there for those moments. I went from traveling 150 days a year down to traveling 2, maybe 3 nights a month max. And it's been transformative for me and my family. But I want to invite you into this idea of picture progress because I have felt the weight of perfection for so long, and it has been so freeing to move to this mindset of progress over perfection. And I want to share it with you. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to share with you 4 pictures that I think might help you catch this idea of progress. I want to use what has been used against us, but for you this time, and for us. So these are the 4 images we're going to dive into. And the first one is called Sign Your Name. Now, it's very important. We have some handouts, Tanika. Would you mind handing out these pages? Because we're going to do an exercise. With this exercise, you're going to be answering a question. And as Tanika passes this out, if you don't have a pen, you might be able to negotiate with the person next to you to borrow one. But I want you to think about this question I'm going to ask you before we do the exercise. And the question is this: what's a goal or a habit or a skill you aspire to develop or achieve? I want you to think about that while the papers are being passed out. What is a goal, a habit, or a skill you aspire to develop or achieve? It doesn't have to be too complicated, just something simple. This will be at the bottom, I think, of the front page. This assignment is going to be at the bottom of the page. I apologize. I was supposed to hand them out earlier. That's my fault. All right, so does everybody see the bottom of the page where it has this question, what's the goal or habit? Do y'all see that? Okay, we're going to do an exercise if you do. There should be 4 lines that you see, and numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. It should look just like this. On line number 4, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take your pen, and I want you to put it in your non-dominant hand, and I want you to write your autograph as if you're a sports star, right? And you've got 60 other kids you got to give an autograph to, all right? So in line number 4, in your non-dominant hand, write your autograph as if you got a lot of autographs to sign today. All right, now, I imagine your signature might look something like this right now, right? It's very ugly. Okay, now we're going to go to line 3, and with your non-dominant hand again, I want you to write your signature, but this time take as much time as you need and try your best to make it look good. If you just look up at me when you're done, that way I know I want to rush y'all too much on this. You got to get it right, you know? Okay, now I want you to put the pen in your dominant hand, and I want you to jump to line 1. And on line 1, I just want you to write your signature as if you always do. Just on line 1, you write your normal signature. All right, now on line 2, I want you to make an exact replica of line 1. Make it look identical. Take all the time you need. With your dominant hand, yes, with your dominant hand, yeah. Okay, is everybody done? All right, so what we have just done here is an experience which actually illustrates the 4 phases of progress. You may be able to visually see it on your paper, at least I hope so. But I want to unpack these 4 phases with you. You see line 4, where I asked you to write your signature quickly with your non-dominant hand? That is called unconscious incompetence. You are terrible and you don't even know it, right? Because I told you to do it and you're just like, yep, I'm going quick, right? I'm just going to get it done. This is a place of a lot of bad things happen and you just don't know, where ignorance is bliss. Then the next phase is what we call conscious incompetence. When I had you write really carefully, it probably still looks really bad, but you tried. You were conscious about it, but you're still bad at it. In fact, this is where most people usually give up when they try to adopt this mindset of progress, because it can be really hard to do. Then line 2, this is called conscious competence. You see, I had you make an exact replica, which many of you probably slowed down and really tried hard to do it. And it looked really good. But if I asked you to do an entire essay like that, it'd be exhausting. It'd be so tiring. It takes a lot of energy. Even though it's good, it just requires a lot of energy. And then the last, this is called unconscious incompetence. You don't even have to think about it. It just comes naturally. I like to think of Michael Jordan in this scenario. When Michael Jordan was in his prime and he was on a breakaway with Scottie Pippen and going towards the goal, he was not thinking, should I pass the ball? Should I go through my knees? Should I stick out my tongue and dunk? No, not at all. He just did whatever his body reacted to, and it was either a behind-the-back pass to Scottie, an alley-oop, or he just jumped from the free-throw line and closed it down, right? He wasn't thinking. It was unconscious competence. And he got there through repetition and doing it over and over and over again. You see, this is exactly what progress looks like in our lives, but many of us never even make it out of unconscious incompetence because it's too embarrassing and we can't handle the fact that we are incompetent at anything. Can I give you some advice here? I have had to learn the hard way that there are 2 ways to get feedback. There is invited feedback, and there is uninvited feedback. That's pretty much the only ways you get it. And I will just tell you, it is so much better to invite feedback than it is to get uninvited feedback, okay? And I share this with you because I want you to understand what you're going to need. If you're going to adopt a mindset of progress, you're going to need to know that you're going to need somebody who can help you have awareness. You need to invite people in to give you feedback. I hope, Tim would say that I do this. I want people to tell me, hey, what did I do well? What am I struggling with? Because I would rather find out about it myself than find out about it later on in a performance review, right? That's like my least favorite way to get feedback. I want to know before. And then if you make it through there, you're going to get to that next place where it's like, well, I'm actually trying, but I still stink at it. And this season, you're going to need people who just acknowledge you. Hey, I see you trying. I see you trying. We need community around us that says, hey, I know you stink at this, but don't worry, like, I see it. I see your effort. And sometimes that's all we need is just somebody to say, hey, like, at least I'm trying to do this, right? Y'all see I'm trying. I'm not intentionally screwing this up. Then if you get it past that, you get to a place where you get to this conscious competence where you're exhausted and you just need accountability. You need somebody who's there who says, hey, you've got this. Keep pushing. Don't slow down. I see you working. You're doing a great job. I know it's tiring, but you can do it. That person right next to you. And then if you get past that, the last thing you need is an audience where you now can start training and teaching others how to conquer what you have conquered. I share this with you because this is something that I have had in my life, and I'm so grateful for the people in this room, for my wife, because I'll be honest, my wife didn't start off with the invited feedback. It was just the regular feedback, that she didn't want, which is probably why I went into depression. But no, I'm just kidding. But I say this because we need to invite this into our lives if we want to adopt a mindset of progress. It's not going to be something that you can just be like, I'm going to do it. You got to create a community around you. And the other thing is this idea of sign your name. The reason that image is important is somebody tell me, what are things you sign your name to? What are examples of things you sign your name to? What's that? Yes. What else? What else do you sign your name to? Or sign your name? When do you have to give your signature? Contracts, checks, time cards, whatever it might be. All these things signify one thing, and it is that you take ownership of what you are signing your name to. The thing about signing our name is that we are the only ones who can take ownership of our mindset, our behavior, our attitude, our response, and we have to sign our name to our own lives. There's a man named Dr. Julian Rotter, who back in the 1950s, he came up with this concept of the locus of control. And I really love this because I'm not sure if you've read about him or anything like that, but there's two types of locus of control. There's an internal locus of control and an external locus of control, which basically is a fancy way of saying an internal of locus control says, I take ownership of how I respond to my circumstances, and an external locus of control says my circumstances shape like who I am and what I do. And what Dr. Julian Rotter has found out is that those who have an internal locus of control, who take ownership and choose to take ownership in how they respond to their circumstances, have had huge success in their lives. I won't read these bullets because you can read them yourselves, but there are so many benefits to us just simply signing our name. Just simply signing our name. So I want to pause for a second, and at your tables, I want you to discuss something. I want you to talk about this. Why is it so few people take ownership of their behaviors, words, and choices? Go ahead and talk about that, and then I'll bring you back up. We all know that ownership is a big deal. We probably talk about it with our employees, but yet so few of us actually do it. What were some of the reasons y'all discussed or discovered at your tables? Anybody want to share? Fear? Yeah, what else?
We discussed it becomes real.
It becomes real when you take ownership.
You know your actions, you know your words, choices, but then it becomes real when you actually accountability for it.
Yeah, well said. Well said. It becomes real. You actually have to accept it, right? Because I think sometimes this idea of picture perfect, right? I don't think that those executives who are hiring out these Strava jockeys necessarily, I don't think they're intentionally saying like, I think I want to be, a little bit immoral here. Like, I don't think that's a conscious decision they're making. I think that they feel so much pressure that they've got to be a good example, to be healthy, and, that everybody looks up to them. And if they're not running, then, maybe their employees won't run. And they have all these great reasons, but yet the truth is it's not reality for them. I can't tell you how many times I've heard executives say, yeah, I never use all my PTO, but I keep telling everybody else to use their PTO. It's funny to me. And I'll tell you, one of the things I love about working out being at Jackson & Coker is we have this like really nice workout gym where we work, and I was so nervous to like go during lunch and work out because it's like, like I want to be a high producer, I want to be respected. And you know what encouraged me to finally do it? Was seeing Tim do it. And when I saw him do it, I thought, oh, well, I know he said it, but he's actually doing it, so it's okay. Because our words say one thing, but our behaviors say something completely different. So the big idea of this image, and I hope it pops into your mind, is you must sign your name. We've got to take ownership of where are we really at. Are you like me in that you're traveling everywhere, but you say you're a family person? Or are you really going to be the family person that you desire to be? I had to sign my name. I had to take ownership of that and change and do something different. So let me give you another image. I love this one. It reminds me of my childhood. When I was a kid, my mom had this big gray bin, and inside were all these Legos. And she would just dump them out, and we had about like a 4-foot by 4-foot gray, base Lego thing, and my brother and I would just go to town. We would build cities, we'd build planes and trucks, and then we would get our G.I. Joes, and, we'd play with them and blow stuff up, and it was like the coolest thing. I just loved it. Well, I took my son to Target and to let him pick out some Legos, because I'm thinking like, yeah, I grew up with Legos. Legos are awesome. Let's do this. Well, we get home, and we start unpacking the box. And as I do, I recognize it's not at all what I experienced as a child, right? For me, there was no pieces that looked alike. It was like you just kind of had to put it together. It was all your imagination. Where now, you open the box, it has very set, clear instructions on how to set up your Legos. Each Legos has got different bags that you have, and then carefully you undo the Legos, you organize them, you have the instructions, then you carefully start piecing them together. And step by step as we're doing this, I found my son just getting frustrated and angry and ticked off. And I'm like, this is supposed to be fun. But you know why he was so angry? Because the instructions and the detail was telling him, you're doing it wrong. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to do Legos, and you're not doing it the right way because it's supposed to look like how it looks on this image on the box. And what you're doing doesn't look anything like that. No wonder my son hated doing it. Because he had this idea of, I've got to be perfect, because in his world, according to Legos, where mine was just be creative, go, do, have fun, make it whatever you want, his world says, no, there is a right and there is a wrong, and you better be on the right side. You better make sure you do the right thing every single time. You see, the idea of this image of Legos is pretty much this. Progress is like building a Lego set without any instruction manual. You work with the pieces you have, making the wisest choices you can. It's not about right or wrong. It's about crafting something that's uniquely yours, one decision at a time. Do the wise thing. Do the wise thing. How true is it, especially in business? Your team comes to you with a decision, and there is not a clear right and wrong. Happens all the time, right? Perfection isn't even an option. I love to listen. I was listening to a couple of executives talk on the rooftop, and they were talking about when companies get big, and, it's really about, got to change your way of thinking, and it's about making decisions for, you got to know what's just going to get put on the back burner, what's most important. It's not even about a right or wrong. It gets so hard because you can't do everything right. You just got to play with the pieces that you have and do the wise thing. There's an artist who I just love. She's a psychologist and an artist. So she puts these pictures up on LinkedIn and Instagram and other places. Her name's Liz Foslin, and she put this up the other day, and I thought it was so good. We think of failure and success as opposites, when in reality, failure is a part of success. Isn't that the truth? It's so true. We often think that we have to make the right decision, like my son putting together Legos. It's got to be perfect. I got to do it right. When the truth is, no, it's what's the purpose in what we're doing? If the decisions we're making are about the purpose, which Legos should be about having fun, then it doesn't matter what the outcome looks like if our purpose is accomplished. When we're leading our organizations, it's about our purpose. Is our purpose getting accomplished, or are we just so nervous about looking like we're doing the right thing and people-pleasing around us? We've got to play with the Legos that we have and make the wisest choices we can, but we can't forget the purpose as to why we're with the Legos in the first place, why we're at this organization in the first place, why we're in Locum Tenens in the first place. That's one of the reasons I love my job. I used to have a really cool, sexy job, I thought. I consulted with NFL teams and sports teams, and I remember coming into Locum Tenens, and I remember thinking, like, I don't even know what this means. Like, this is a weird job. I called the first person ever. I did a cold call, and the lady just totally chewed me out. And I thought, well, I'm a car salesman. That's what I am. Like, that's what this is. But I have learned that I start to love it because what we do actually is pretty cool. And I get reminded of it often when I'm down that, oh yeah, I connect providers and communities to transform lives. That's what I do. And that gets me through, and I have to remind myself, hey, I just got to make the wisest decision with the Legos that I have, like to accomplish that mission. Sometimes I got to make calls that might be a wrong call, but it still accomplishes the mission. At least others might think it's wrong, but I know what I'm trying to do. And that's freeing for me. Where in the past I would beat myself up wondering if I make a decision, oh, what's Tim going to think? What's this person going to think? And that creeps up every now and then still. I'm not free from it. But I have to remind myself, I got to play with the Legos I have. I got to play with the Legos I have. So I want to pause for a moment, and I want you to discuss this. Why is a failure, or what is a failure maybe you've experienced that led to a future success? What's a failure you've experienced that led to a future success? I'll let you talk about that. I know some of us have a flight to catch later, so I want to keep going, but I would like to hear from some of the tables. What's maybe an interesting failure you heard from someone at your table that ended up leading to a success? I'd love to hear from you. Yes, ma'am.
So I'll speak up myself. So when I first started recruiting, talking about ownership in a different kind of way, but so I thought my account manager was going to reach out to a provider, and she thought I was going to reach out, and no one took ownership of that relationship, and obviously it failed big time. She showed up, she wasn't supposed to go to her shift, and that was a huge failure. First person that yelled at me when I first started recruiting, so obviously we probably all have similar experiences, but that failure to take ownership of my physician relationship led to many future successful relationships because I took ownership of that relationship.
Yeah, what a great example. It's so true though, right? Had you not experienced the heartburn of that failure, you may not have ever crossed your T's and dotted your I's as much, right? What's another one? Somebody else share. Who had a good one? Yes, sir.
I think all of us have one these romantic relationships. At some point you fail, and hopefully it makes you some success.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? We have you said like kind of this romanticized idea of what a relationship looks like, and then eventually you fall short. Yeah, so true. Well, let me share something with you that I think might be a helpful visual. You know, when you're in a perfection mindset and you face an obstacle, you kind of have a certain cycle. And as I walk through this, I just want you to ask yourself quietly whether or not maybe you fall into this sometimes. Your leader comes to you and tells you we've got this big project we have to do. The perfectionist mindset says, well, I need certainty. Well, if we're going to do this, are we going to be able to hit the deadline? Am I going to have the resources that I need? Am I going to have X, Y, Z? Are we going to be, if we do this, is it going to mean X, Y, Z? And we crave certainty when we're in a perfection mindset. And we all know that there's no possible way to ever provide certainty. It's just not possible. We can maybe provide clarity, but we can't provide certainty. So usually what happens is after you're into that project and you've gone gung-ho into it, that leader comes back and says, hey, it didn't work out how we thought, we're going to pivot, and you're thinking all this work that I did is just completely gone. I knew this was coming, that's why I asked for X, Y, Z, and you then move to rejection. Next time this person comes to me with a project, I'm not even going to listen. I'm not even going to do this because I am not about to waste my time again working with that individual. Which then that leads to distraction of trying to find other projects to do, trying to work with other individuals, running around, trying to just distract yourself from ever having to deal with that person or project again, which then leads into you having caution when people bring you projects because you're wondering, is this going to be real or am I going to get burned on this? And you're thinking about yourself, and you're thinking about whether or not you can actually do it, and so it goes. Now let me show you what it looks like on the other side with the mindset of progress. Same scenario, the leader comes to you with a project and you realize there's no certainty, so all right, I'm going to get clarity. So we've got this going on, this is going on, all right, well, how's this going to affect this team? What about this person? What about that? Okay, great, I've got as much clarity as I can. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to make best efforts to move forward on this. The project fails, and when the project fails, instead of rejection, you move to reflection. What happened there? I wonder why this failed. I know it was completely out of my control, but I want to understand so that we can make sure that we do this better next time and use our resources in a wise and steward them well. So after that reflection, it then changes your action and your behavior because now you're going to make different decisions because instead of rejecting that it wasn't your fault, it was all this other person's fault, you're taking ownership and you're signing your name and you're now saying, hey, I'm going to use the pieces that I have and we had a big failure and I can learn from this to change how I behave next time. And that leads you to have courage because you've already been through the muck. You've already realized that you had a doctor who you didn't take ownership for, so you know how to do it next time to avoid that catastrophe again. And then that leads to you seeking clarity. And so the spiral goes. Which spiral would you rather be in? The progress one. But yet, do we not often have that person, maybe at work, who we go into this perfection mindset with? It's hard, but I want to challenge you to recognize that sometimes other people on your team are going to bring a bag of Legos to you and they're not going to be organized. It's not going to have certainty and here's the instructions. They're going to give you a big thing of Legos and you're like, what do I do with this? But I would just say use the pieces you have. Gain as much clarity around what is the vision that you want these Legos to be built into. And reflect when something goes wrong and then change your actions and then cultivate that courage to be creative and to fall and fail forward because if you do, you can build cities. So here's the next image. This one actually is this is personal for me. It's a fun one. My wife and I love to travel. And before we had kids, we would spend every nickel and dime we had to go around the world and just adventure. And one time back in, I think it was like 2012, we went to Thailand. It was the most fun experience. The food is amazing. The people are like the most joyful, happy people. And it is just such a cool city. I mean, everywhere in Thailand is beautiful. But when we were in Bangkok specifically, the city's just awesome. But there are parts of the city that are very trashy, a lot like this picture. And also in Bangkok, you'll notice there are Buddha statues everywhere. I mean, they're just everywhere. It's kind of like, I don't know how to compare it to anything because there's nothing like it. They're just like all throughout the city, every single block. They just got them everywhere, right? Well, because of that, the people, in certain areas will just kind of put their trash just down. And it looks kind of like this. And just they don't take care of them. So the monks in the community will come out and it's kind of their practice to take those statues, bring them in, clean them up, and then put them back out. Well, one time, these monks were doing this exercise and cleaning up the statues. And they were moving this statue into their monastery. And as they did it, it slipped and fell. And a huge crack went in it. Well, they picked it back up and they started moving it again, but as they do, the cement just kind of kept chipping because it had the infrastructure had been broken. But what was really neat is as this continued to unfold and break apart, they noticed something glimmering inside. This is a true story, I kid you not. Inside that statue is the largest piece of gold that has ever been discovered in the world. They have it now on display in Bangkok in one of the monasteries. This is the actual picture of the statue. And what's so wild is this thing was out there for years looking like this, with all the trash around it, when in reality, this is what was going on. But nobody knew. Nobody knew. When you look at that and you see the trash around all that gold, doesn't it just feel uncomfortable? It just feels weird. Can I tell you something? This is what you do to yourself. Either you put trash on yourself or you let other people put trash on it because you don't think you have anything worthy inside. We are all like that statue. This was first taught to me by a mentor of mine named Dr. Tim Elmore. He has these images he uses. He calls them habitudes. They're images that form leadership habits and attitudes. And this is one of his direct images. And he would tell me over and over and over again, JT, you got to find the gold inside. Don't forget. You got gold inside of you. Here's what it means in summary. If you never penetrate the concrete, you'll never realize the value that lies inside you, nor will those around you. If you fail to believe in yourself, you'll never reach your full potential. Penetrate the concrete. You see, progress starts with self-awareness and belief. You have to be able to believe in yourself once you discover how much unconscious incompetence you have, and recognize that there is also gold next to that ugly, maybe, thing that you need to get off you, right? That trash. But there is gold inside. In fact, Joyce Meyer said it this way: it's impossible to perform in a manner that is inconsistent with the way that you see yourself. So if you see yourself as just this nasty concrete statue, you will always be a nasty concrete statue. But if you can see that you have gold inside of you, then you can be treated as if you have gold inside of you, and you will treat yourself as if you have gold inside of you. Some of you are visual learners, so I've created a graph, okay? This graph will kind of help explain it. You see that top line represents your potential. The bottom line is the perspective you have of yourself, your self-perspective. It is shown that your performance will always hover around how you see yourself. Ted Wayne has been a mentor of mine for a long time, a man I really look up to. He used to work with us at Jackson & Coker. He's why I'm in this industry. And I remember getting this job, and I went from, I was a vice president, led a team, had all this stuff, and I came in, I'm a producer now. I don't have anybody that, reports to me, which is awesome, by the way. And he would tell me after, I would run into some bumps or just kind of feel like, man, I just feel like, I don't know, this is tough. And he would just say, hey, just maximize your potential in this position. Just see how far you can go. Maximize your potential. See how big you can take it. And don't worry about the rest. And when he said that to me, it helped me slow down and realize I'm limiting my perspective, because the truth was, it's not that I wanted to lead other people or I was craving the position. It was really, I was scared. Because my first whole year in this industry, y'all know how much I sold? $0. Zero. I'm so grateful that Tim kept me. Since then, it has changed drastically, but I had to change my mindset. And I had to realize that I have to reach my fullest potential rather than just trying to worry about getting somewhere else. And it's been so helpful for me. It's made me satisfied and excited about what I get to do, rather than being paralyzed by fear and manipulating myself and saying like, oh, I maybe not be that good at this. I'm like, no, I can be good at this. I see the gold inside myself. So here's what I want you to discuss at your tables for a moment. Why is it so much easier to see the gifts in others but not in ourselves? Go ahead and talk about that, and I'll bring you back up. All right, forgive me, I'm gonna stop you there. For the sake of time, I usually want to hear from the table, but for the sake of time, I want to keep getting to this next image, and then hopefully, I know some of you all are trying to get out, so I'll keep going here. But let me give you just some quick bullet points of advice of how you can maybe slow down and penetrate the concrete. Okay, this is work that takes a long time. First of all, This is not just like, oh yeah, I can do this now. I personally have had and continue to have coaching, people around me, professional help to help you do this. So this is not light, but in short, if I could boil it down, it would be slowing down to really discover your strengths, truly clarifying your values, embracing your story, and trusting your worth. It is a huge, refreshing moment when I can go in and make a decision and know that I am trusting that I am doing what I think is best. And if I'm told no, or if I'm scolded for it or penalized for it, it is so much easier to go to bed at night knowing I did what I thought was best and knowing I can just learn from it if maybe I was wrong. Then going in, making a decision because I'm trying to please someone else, or I'm trying to do it the way that I think that maybe they want it done, but it's not really what I would want to do, that is just not a game that is fun to play. And I'll be honest, that is something I have struggled with because I'm a people pleaser. I love to make other people happy. And it's something I am continuing to learn on is I've got to embrace my story and trust my worth, that I have good thoughts and I can stand up for them. So, penetrate the concrete. I'm going to go into our last image. I live in a downtown Norcross, Georgia, which there's this huge railroad that goes right through it. There's a park right there that I take my kids to. They call it Choo Choo Park because every 30 minutes, a choo-choo train comes through. And it's so fun. You're playing on the playground, and when that train comes, you hear the gates start coming down, and the kids just flock to the gate, you know. And it is so loud. They honk that horn. You know, you see the moms with the babies like holding their ears. And it's just every 30 minutes. But it's so fun. So with this, I started to think about like, man, trains are kind of cool. Like every little kid loves a train, right? Have you ever met a kid that doesn't love a train? Like they all do. They're like, this is so cool. And then as an adult, you're like, yeah, it is kind of cool. But trains are fascinating. So I went in and I said, okay, like, well, when was the first train like actually like made, or at least here in America? Like, when did they first lay the first tracks and stuff? And I found out. Okay, so I'm going to share that with you. Maybe you like these interesting facts. So it was July 4th, 1828 in Baltimore, of all places, and it was Charles Carroll, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, is when he broke ground on the first ever railroad. And as I think about this, it's kind of mind-boggling to me, right? Because you kind of envision, you know, these railroad workers out there, and there's just a slew of them. And I like to think of like, maybe like my grandpa or something, which he's not that old, but he's rocking on his chair, and he's just seeing these people. It took them years to do this, right? And he's watching them, and he's like, what are these young bucks doing? Why are they laying these tracks? So, you know, he asks them, he's like, hey, why are you doing this? Y'all got a lot of people out here spending a lot of money on this material. Like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, well, we're making this track because we're going to have this thing called an engine, and it's going to help us transport stuff from here up to New York, and it's going to just be able to transport things. And he's like, well, why don't you just take a wagon? I could have done it like 16 times by the time y'all are done with this. You wouldn't understand it, right? It would make no sense. But we all know what ended up happening after those railroad tracks were made. It changed the whole world. Railroads completely accelerated the Industrial Revolution and broke down barriers that we could never imagine. But if we had that way of thinking of, oh man, like why don't you just do it the old way? Why are you putting so much effort into laying tracks? We never would have tasted the benefits that it brought. So the summary of this idea of lay the tracks is this. You see, off the tracks, a train is useless. But on the tracks, it can carry enormous loads. Trains need tracks, and people need processes. With the right habits, attitudes, systems in place, you really can achieve almost anything. We all want to maybe have a mindset of positivity or progress or maybe that healthy lifestyle. We all want it, but very few of us will actually lay the tracks to bring it to reality. Thanks for having my back, Siri. You're right. So I want to share with you a personal story of my father-in-law and how he lays tracks of relationship in our lives. I recognize not everyone has the blessing and the benefit of having an awesome relationship with their in-laws. I am one of the very rare human beings that does. And if this is not your story, I totally understand. Maybe this story will help you try to be this type of in-law one day. But my father-in-law is the most intentional human being I've ever met. In fact, he has 4 daughters, and all 4 daughters, as they've married different men, he's brought in those men as true sons. So much so that every single month, we will get together and we will go have a meal and go watch a movie together. And he tells us that he is the corporate sponsor. So he's paying for it all, which is a great way for son-in-laws to hang out, by the way. And when we go to this Mexican joint every single month, and he tells the waitress every time, we're celebrating today, we're celebrating. I got my son-in-laws here, and we are celebrating today because God is good and we're here together. And he says, bring the guacamole, bring the cheese dip, bring the pitcher of margaritas. And he gives us a feast. And while we're there over the years, he has asked us 3 simple questions. What's God teaching you? How's your work going? And how are you loving your wife? And at the beginning, it was really awkward. It was really uncomfortable. But now, having been married to my wife for 14 years, these men that you see up here are my absolute best friends. You see, my father-in-law laid a train track of bringing us together every month, doing an annual trip, an adventure, and he's always the corporate sponsor, and he has set this culture in our family that we as his sons matter just as much, if not more, than his daughters to him. In fact, when my wife and I were going through a hard time, when I was having that depression, that usually has spillover effects. When me and my wife had a scuttle and she went to go stay with her parents, do you know who came to my house? My father-in-law. And he sat with me on the couch and he put his arm around me and he said, I love you and I'm with you. You want to have a glass of whiskey? And we did. But he spent the night with me on the couch that night. And that's how I know he loves me. He's got the train tracks there that he's intentionally laid. My father-in-law is an unbelievable man, but he has gone out of his way intentionally and poured in a lot of energy to make this a reality. And he makes a choice every day to do so. So I will encourage you to lay your own tracks. Here's the simplicity of how you can do this in your life, right? Could be traditions, creating traditions for your family, traditions for your team. Can be routines. For me, I hate working out, I really do, but I know it's good for me. But I've learned to trick myself. I love being around people. I'm an extrovert. So I found community is the best thing ever for me to exercise. So if there's classes at work, I'll do it with the community. In the mornings, there's this group called F3 where a bunch of guys get together and they work out together and we pray for each other. It's awesome. I love it. It gives me energy. It's a great rhythm. Also, accountability is another piece of the track we've got to lay down. We have to have accountability, which if you're going to have good accountability, you have to have that community around you that won't just tell you what you're doing wrong, but they'll encourage you, they'll applaud you, they'll affirm you, they'll remind you who you are and that you have gold inside of you. You've got to start getting serious about the keystone habits of your life and really create a strategy in the areas that you know you need to grow where you're unconsciously incompetent. And I have a drove of them. I think my boss, Robert, has told me 1,000 times how bad I am with spelling and details, and I do contracts, so this is not a good thing. There have been many a time where I've sent a contract and forgotten to change the name in the contract of the health system. And he's like, hey, just proofing this again. Remember what we talked about, right? It's something I've got to work on. So for the sake of time, I want to just kind of give you a tool. Ultimately, what I would ask you to do is to think about what is that one thing? What is one track you need to make? Think about that, and I hope you're able to apply it. For me, I've realized I'm ADHD. I am just constantly all over the place. So I've had to create my own, what I call a purpose planner, where I think about my quarter, I think about my month, I have habits that I'm literally tracking, I think about my week, and then I have my daily plan. I was thrilled because Tim actually requires our whole company to have a daily plan. And I was pumped when he did this because I'm like, sweet, I don't have to try. Like, I already got this. I got this ritual. But if you think that you could benefit by that, I have a QR code on the pieces of paper, and I'd love to send it to you. I'd love to have a conversation with you about how to develop these habits into your life, how to get focused, and how to get yourself outside of your comfort zone by creating a plan and laying tracks. Because I have found that even though my intentions for so long have been great, to be a great father and be a great husband and be a great worker, I never actually changed until I had a plan. And I had the accountability of, I've got something that's going to keep me focused. So I would encourage you to do this. Lay the tracks. Lay the tracks. So I hope you can see now that pictures really are powerful. And when you leave today, I hope that one of these pictures will pop into your head at the moment that you need it the most. And I want to close with the story of a friend who I think has lived this really well. It'll be about 5 minutes and then I'll be done and you can head out. But one of my dear friends is a man named Timothy Alexander. When he was young, he was a little boy who had a dream to be a football player. He came from a really rough part of Birmingham, Alabama. Dad wasn't in his life. In high school, he lost his brother in a house fire, and they lost everything. His mom worked 4 jobs. He never really saw her. He was raised by his neighbors and aunties and just had a really rough life. And he knew he just could play football and everything would be okay. When he was in high school, he was 6'7", and was a phenomenal tight end. In fact, he was one of the top tight ends in the country his senior year, had full ride offers to Florida and Alabama, and he was on his way to living his dream. When one Saturday, right after their last game of the season and getting ready for playoffs, they won their last game of the year, and the next day they were going to be celebrated at some event, and they were really tired, and he and his buddy, along with his 3-year-old nephew, got in the car and headed out to this city that was somewhere up north, and so they were going through the mountains. Well, his friend fell asleep at the wheel, and they got in an accident. Timothy, of course, being the man that he is, unbuckled his seatbelt because they were right at the edge of the mountain, and the car was about to go down the mountain. So he unbuckles his seatbelt, goes back, grabs his nephew, throws him out of the car, but didn't have time to get out himself, and the car fell down. And he and his friend tumbled down the mountain. His friend was buckled in, was conscious, got out of the car. Timothy was unconscious and started pulling him out of the vehicle. The broken glass of Timothy's window, his door wouldn't open. As he pulling him through, he slipped on some oil and dropped Timothy, and it fractured his spine. Timothy went paralyzed from the neck down. Doctors told him he would never walk again. He'd probably never be able to use his hands. Doctors also told him that his mind would kill him faster than his body ever will, and that he needed to work on being positive and getting hold of his mind. Well, with that, Timothy ended up learning how to use his hands and his arms again, and he asked the physicians, what are my chances to be able to walk again? And they said, way less than 1%. And he told the physicians, I love this, he said, well, we don't need it to be easy, we just need it to be possible. So he took that as a hope, and he went on, he told the physician he was going to play college football, which doesn't make a lot of sense when you're in a wheelchair, but he went to UAB, and when he got to UAB, they had football tryouts. And you know what Timothy did? He showed up in his wheelchair. In fact, Timothy showed up at football tryouts at UAB, and when the coach said all skill players on the line, which meant tight ends, wide receivers, etc., he got on the line. Coach blowed the whistle, and he started pushing his wheelchair. And as he's doing it, he's seeing other guys around him who are throwing up in the trash can. He's saying, "Why are you throwing up? I'm in a wheelchair, and I'm working harder than you." And he just starts encouraging and calling other people up all around him. That at the end of the tryout, the coaches went up to him and said, "Young man, we've never seen somebody with the heart that you have. We can't afford not to have you on this team." And he became the first ever paraplegic full-ride scholarship athlete at UAB. But 2 years in, as he was living his dream as a college athlete, the president of the university had to cancel both football, bowling, or all football, bowling, and rifling programs because they didn't have the funding anymore. Timothy was furious. This was his dream. So he went to the president of the school, got a meeting with him, and said, "Sir, you cannot cancel the football program." And the president said, "Well, quite frankly, unless you have $30 million, there's nothing I can do." Timothy said, "We don't need it to be easy. We just need it to be possible." So Timothy, with the zeal that he has and the skills that he had been learning in his marketing classes, went out and started a movement and started lobbying with business leaders across Birmingham, Alabama, and within 2 years had raised $38 million and reinstated football, bowling, and rifling at UAB. In addition to that, he told all of those boosters and all of those business leaders that he would be the person who walks the team out onto the field when they bring the football program back. I was at this game, and it was a magical moment. Because even though the doctor said he would never be able to do it, he kept with his physical therapy and kept going. And Timothy Alexander, although had some help, took his first steps and led the football team out onto the field. And Timothy has always said and has constantly told me, "JT, remember, we don't need it to be easy. We just need it to be possible." Guys, we live in a picture-perfect world where we think everything should be easy. It should just come natural. I wish we all had a little bit more Timothy Alexander in us. But I have some good news. Today, you can stop picturing perfect, and you can start picturing progress. And if you do, you won't need things to be easy. You'll just need them to be possible. Thank you.